two things. One is, does the UNHCR have the mandate, and protocol-wise, would it have been proper if, admittedly hindsight, your people said, with such a big operation, we would like to actually post people there as observers? I don't know whether that be within your mandate or within protocol or not. Second thing is a point you just said. You said during the hunger strike, pregnant women were denied water. I wasn't quite sure whether you meant denied water by the fact that they were on strike themselves or by the people organizing the strike, or actually denied water by the government.
Clarify, too?
Yes, they were denied, and it wasn't a very common occurrence, but on certain occasions, particularly in High Island, where we had a tense situation over the proposed deportation of 3 women and a child, when the camp went on strike en masse. I mean, tensions were raised even to higher levels. At that point, the information that we've been receiving was that pregnant women who wanted to eat or drink were being denied food and water by their own compatriots.
Not by the government?
Not by the government. No, in fact, the government was making food available at all times. People were not taking it.
Monitors?
And your role or mandate?
I think I've addressed the question of monitoring and observing.
You didn't want to be seen to be working with the government.
I think I explained the 3 or 4 points and 3 or 4 elements that went into my consideration regarding our so-called monitoring or observing, even if we could be given this permission.
Martin, we have to keep it short now.
Mr. Asadi, I think we all recognize that the ultimate future for the Vietnamese stranded here is back home in Vietnam, and your agency has a key role to play in the counseling effort. Would you not agree that the evidence so far is that this operation and the resulting publicity has actually backfired in that initiative, and that it has hardened the resolve of people here and probably made your own counseling efforts more difficult? My second question is, as I understand it, you have only 27 counsellors for 26,000 people. Only 3 of the 27 speak Vietnamese. What proportion of your total staff in Hong Kong are counsellors? In other words, have you got a lot of backup people who are not involved? In other words, how efficient it is in terms of the number of counsellors? And wouldn't you think there need to be an increase in the number of counsellors, particularly those who speak Vietnamese?
Well, I think you're absolutely correct. I think the way events worked out on the 7th of April and particularly their aftermath will not help certainly UNHCR in trying to promote voluntary repatriation. In fact, we don't like any disruptions to the normal life in the camp, so that we can get on with our work and try to bring this long and sad saga of the Vietnamese boat people to an end by the end of 1995, which we have been mandated to do by the international community. So I don't think things will really have been helped by the events of the 7th of April. And it's most unfortunate. These injuries are most unfortunate, but I also think that the climate that has the exacerbated climate of mistrust, and this mistrust existed even before the 7th of April, but things have just now gotten probably worse, will not help us in our work.
So in hindsight, it was a mistake, this operation?
I don't think anybody could have predicted how the operation would have worked out. I think if someone would have told me beforehand, not just 12 hours but 12 minutes, that we would be using tear gas and there would be 200 or so injuries, and so that would have happened, obviously we would have vigorously protested. I don't see how any decent organization or human being would want to see this type of situation. But absolutely correct. I think things this is a setback to our efforts to promote a doable solution for the population here in Hong Kong. Now, as far as our counselors are concerned, We have here in Hong Kong the largest counseling program anywhere in the world. We have about 25,000 Vietnamese here, of whom most of whom are not refugees, and nevertheless we have the largest social services section in the world. Some of my other colleagues serving in places like Bosnia, Afghanistan, Rwanda would just envy me to no end. So I can never say we have enough counselors, we have enough information, because these are difficult things to measure and to gauge. But I can certainly say that by our global standards, and given the number of people that we're supposed to be reaching, the number of staff that we have working on counseling and social services in general is the highest in the world.
What's your total headcount in Hong Kong?
Our total staff in Hong Kong is something like 230 staff, which again is an astronomical figure.
What do the other 190 do?
The other 190, apart from appearing before Let's Go from time to time, many people are involved in legal work. As you know, our legal and our screening work in Hong Kong is a very elaborate and extensive one, so we have a vast number of lawyers and others working for us in screening and protection. We have a vast durable solutions operation here, which has allowed hundreds of thousands of people to be given a durable solution, whether it's resettlement in the third countries or whether it's voluntary repatriation to Vietnam. We have, again, a rather vast field presence. Again, when you compare our operations elsewhere, the number of field staff that we have working for relatively small numbers of people here are proportionally quite high. We have other things like medical, social services, education, etc., other types of services that we also provide. But essentially, it's legal, durable solutions, protection, counseling, social services, etc.
Simon, last question. Huh? Thank you very much, Mr. Sadi, for coming this morning.
Thank you.
If there are any other questions, we will probably forward them to you or something.
Okay, with pleasure.
But we will consider your points very carefully.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members, we have another meeting at 10:45, as you know, on residential care homes. So I'm going to guillotine the meeting. I'm going to guillotine shortly before 10:45, regardless of, how many people have put down their names to ask the questions. And would you agree that we go, well, I suppose we'll give the Secretary for Security a few minutes to say his piece, but I'll probably give him 5 minutes and that's all, and you can ask all the questions you want. Mr. Asprey? Morning. Thank you very much for coming, Mr. Asprey. It's very rare that this panel gets to see you.
Okay.
Yes. Would you like to spend 5 minutes first on letting us have a brief rundown as to the government's side of the story, so to speak, and then we will go into the questions. We understand, of course, that there is an inquiry pending, but nevertheless, I'm sure that members would like to have a general idea of how this happened and why so much force has been used. Would you please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm afraid it might take me a little bit more than 5 minutes, but I hope you'll bear with me to give the outline of this. I think I'd like to start off with our policy objective, which is to secure the repatriation of all the remaining screened-out Vietnamese migrants in our camps in accordance with the Comprehensive Plan of Action. If the arrival and departure trends of the past 2 years continue, we might be able to achieve this by the end of 1995 or early 1996. To do this, we rely principally on the UNHCR voluntary repatriation program. 42,000 have returned home voluntarily since 1989. But we also have a non-voluntary repatriation program through which about 850 Vietnamese have been returned to Vietnam in recent years. There are 25,000 Vietnamese remaining in our camps, and we hope that they will realize that they have no future here and that they must go home to Vietnam. Both our and UNHCR counselling efforts are directed to this end. Our voluntary repatriation program was particularly successful in the 6 months to February this year, when some 10,000 returned voluntarily to Vietnam. However, since about the middle of February, we have been concerned at the increased tension in our camps, and there has been a significant fall-off in the number of applicants for voluntary repatriation. The protest actions themselves have been peaceful, but they have been coupled with intelligence reports of intimidation, the manufacturing of weapons, the storage of inflammable material, and a drift towards the establishment of no-go areas, particularly in Whitehead. This is not just our assessment. We've had many independent reports in the last couple of months of the volatile situation in Whitehead and the need for us to take action to defuse the situation. We accept that we have a responsibility to maintain law and order in the camps and to ensure the safety of all those in detention. If there is any violence or breakdown of law and order in the camps, it is the Vietnamese in detention who are likely to suffer. And we saw this in the case of Tha Chow in 1989 and of Sekong in 1992. Prior to the 7th of April, we were particularly concerned about the law and order situation in Section 7 of Whitehead. Before the operation, emergency dig gates were blocked and a lookout system was in force. We were aware of contingency plans by the Vietnamese and rehearsals to deal with any attempt to remove them. The residents of Section 7 are long stayers and had previously resisted a transfer to Section 7 from Section 1 in May 1993, a transfer which had been publicised well in advance. And the last ORP flight had included people from Section 7. Planning for an ORP flight was also underway at this time, and we feared a major confrontation if we attempted to select 60 Vietnamese directly from a population of 15,000 in Whitehead. We also have a long-standing objective to reduce the population of Whitehead, as had been recommended by Justice Kempster in his report in 1992. And we felt that we should now take this further by closing one entire section of Whitehead. What I've just said provides the background to the operation on the 7th of April. Our objective was to transfer 1,500 Vietnamese from Section 7 of Whitehead to High Island. I took this decision and I take responsibility for it. Some 580 CSD officers and 700 police were involved in the operation, during which tear gas was used. Why was it necessary to proceed as we did? In the past few years, we've effected the peaceful transfer of thousands of Vietnamese between our different camps. This time, the situation was different. Our intelligence sources indicated that there would be strong opposition. We had to be prepared for this. If inadequate manpower was deployed, there would be a significant risk of confrontation and of injury both to the Vietnamese and our own disciplined services. And we were not prepared to take that risk, particularly bearing in mind the involvement of women and children. The decision was made not to let the Vietnamese know in advance that it was proposed to move them. Again, our intelligence suggested that if they were forewarned, we would face organized resistance, not only from those in Section 7, but also from those in Section 8, to which there is open access from Section 7. There was also the possibility of a reaction from the other sections of Whitehead, which on the morning of the operation accommodated about 15,000 people. I was aware that if there was resistance, tear gas was likely to be used. The use of tear gas in such situations is considered the most effective measure for securing control with minimum force. It reduces the requirement for the deployment of force and physical contact. The advantages of using tear gas were acknowledged in Mr. Justice Kempster's report into the Sekong incidents in February 1992. The brief facts of what happened on the morning of the 7th of April are as follows. The operation began at 6 in the morning. with the arrival of the CSD and police contingents in Whitehead Detention Centre. 270 CSD officers were deployed to Section 7 of Whitehead. The remaining 1,000 police and CSD officers were not deployed to Section 7. They were deployed to cordon off Section 8 and the remainder of the centre. The measures which we thus took to seal off the rest of the camp in this way were successful, and we thereafter encountered resistance only in Section 7. There was no involvement from the residents of the other sections. At the time of entry into Section 7, approximately 500 persons blocked access to the dormitories, and about 50 others climbed onto the roofs of the huts. The Vietnamese in Section 7 were advised in Vietnamese through the PA system that they were to be transferred to High Island. They were requested to pack their belongings. They refused to comply with this request. Further attempts at counselling proved unsuccessful, and at 6:30 in the morning, 25 rounds of tear gas were released. This had the effect of moving the majority into the dormitories. The first residents began packing, and after counselling, some 1,100 persons were persuaded to leave Section 7 before 10 a.m. without any further incident. But this left some 300 to 400 persons, including women and children, on the dormitory roofs, who could not be persuaded to come down. The CSD were concerned about the safety of the roofs, with so many people on them, and also at the danger to all concerned if they attempted physically to remove them from the roofs. After continuing efforts to persuade them to come down failed, a concentration of tear gas was fired at about 10:05. This resulted in a small number coming down from the roof. There was further counselling, but with no effect, and at 10:25 another concentration of tear gas was fired. This caused the remaining people to start moving from the roofs, assisted by staff who used ladders. There was a steady movement from the roofs at this stage, and with more counselling, those who were still reluctant were eventually persuaded to come down. By about 11:40, the roofs were clear, and by 2:30, the last group had vacated Section 7 after returning to their huts and packing their belongings. On the afternoon of the 7th of April, the Commissioner of Correctional Services held a press conference. He disclosed the details of the operation, and what he said was correct at the time. Neither then or subsequently was there any intention of covering up what had happened. We accept that we made mistakes. In particular, an incorrect figure for the number of Vietnamese who sought treatment was published on the 12th of April. We have admitted this mistake. On the 14th of April, the Governor appointed 2 Justices of the Peace to inquire into the operation in Whitehead. They will seek to establish the detailed facts and will listen to the complaints made by the Vietnamese. In view of this inquiry, I would not like at this stage to make judgments or to speculate on the detailed sequence of events on the 7th of April, which are the subject of conflicting reports and allegations. But I would be happy to try to answer your questions.